You are a young woman in 16th century Istanbul. The year is 1520, and fate has brought you here as one of the most striking captives taken from the Caucasus. Tonight your footsteps echo silently along the marble halls of Topkapi Palace. The polished floor swallows every sound from your silk slippers, and the air is thick with the scent of jasmine and the salty tang of the Bosphorus. Beside you, an older woman dressed in elaborate robes leans close, her voice a hurried, urgent whisper. What she tells you now will decide whether you survive the months ahead or vanish without a trace into the shadows of imperial history. These are not ordinary customs, not simple matters of etiquette. They are chains, unseen but unbreakable, that will bind every moment of your life inside the Ottoman harem. The rules of the Sultan's private quarters were unlike anything the outside world could imagine. They were precise, controlling, and terrifying in their reach. For the women trapped within this gilded cage, these weren't polite suggestions. They were laws, enforced with ruthless consistency by a strict hierarchy of powerful eunuchs and even more powerful women. In this secretive world, a single mistake, a misplaced glance, or an unapproved word could mean exile, disgrace, or a silent death in the dark waters below. The records that remain, palace archives, foreign ambassadors' reports, and the very architecture of these hidden chambers reveal how an empire transformed human intimacy into a fearsome tool of control. And the first of these laws, a rule so fundamental it governed every single night within these walls, was designed to shatter the very possibility of love itself. The first and most devastating of these laws was a rule of cold, calculated distance. No concubine, no matter how beautiful, no matter how much the Sultan adored her, was ever allowed to spend the entire night in his bed. For centuries, this ritual had been observed with the precision of a military drill. Once the Sultan fell asleep, the woman at his side was required to rise silently in the darkness, gather her clothing, and slip back into her assigned quarters before the first call to prayer echoed over the city. Guards stood watch through the night, their presence a constant reminder that this was not a place of rest, but of temporary privilege. If any woman remained in the Sultan's chamber when the first rays of light touched the lattice windows, the punishment was swift and absolute: execution. This was not a rule of pointless cruelty. It was a powerful tool of statecraft. By forbidding overnight stays, the harem's rulers ensured no single woman could whisper in the Sultan's ear during the vulnerable hours of the night, planting ideas that might sway the fate of the empire. More importantly, it made true intimacy impossible. No woman would ever share the Sultan's bed long enough to capture both his heart and his mind, ensuring he remained an untouchable, almost divine figure, his affections never fully possessed by any single mortal. But in 1520, one woman, a young captive from what is now Ukraine, later known as Hurrem Sultan, broke this sacred rule and lived. When she remained in Sultan Suleiman's chambers until the morning light, she should have sealed her death sentence. Instead, it marked the beginning of her astonishing rise to power. The reaction inside the harem was immediate and volcanic. Senior concubines who had spent years meticulously obeying this brutal law were horrified. The Valide Sultan, the Sultan's own mother and the ultimate ruler of the harem, saw her authority directly challenged by this audacious newcomer who dared to turn a private rebellion into a public revolution. Palace records describe chaos rippling through the hierarchy. Established favorites demanded Hurrem's execution, while younger concubines whispered anxiously, wondering if the foundations of their world were beginning to crack. Hurrem Sultan had broken the first and most sacred rule of the harem's intimate world, and survived, changing the course of the empire forever. But for the thousands of women who were not Hurrem, another, even more heartbreaking law awaited, a rule that turned the greatest joy a woman could experience, the birth of a son, into a sentence of permanent exile. Hurrem Sultan had broken the first and most sacred rule of the harem's intimate world and survived, changing the course of the empire forever. But for the thousands of women who were not Hurrem, another, even more heartbreaking law awaited, a rule that turned the greatest joy a woman could experience, the birth of a son, into a sentence of permanent exile. It was known as the one concubine, one son law, and its logic was as simple as it was devastating. Once a concubine bore the Sultan a male heir, she could never share his bed again. At first, this moment felt like the ultimate triumph. To give birth to a prince, a shehzad, was the highest achievement for a concubine. Her status soared instantly. She was moved from the crowded communal quarters to grander private apartments, assigned her own servants, and granted immense wealth and influence. She was now the mother of a potential future sultan, a powerful figure in the treacherous world of palace politics. But with that honor came a cold and irreversible exile from the sultan's affections. The very act that had won her power also ended her intimate life forever. This brutal law was a direct and calculated response to the threat of civil war. By ensuring each potential heir had a different mother, the system prevented any one woman from creating a powerful faction with multiple sons, which could destabilize the line of succession. For the women, their lavish new apartments became beautiful prisons, located far from the Sultan's chambers, where they could wield political power from a distance, but were starved of the personal connection that had brought them there. For those who gave birth only to daughters, the fate was different. They could remain in the rotation, still competing for the Sultan's attention, but they lived with the constant, crushing dread that their next child might be a son, ending their nights of intimacy forever. This desperation led many women to take dangerous measures, secretly using herbs and other crude methods to delay pregnancy, all in the hope of prolonging their access to the Sultan. Their bodies became a battlefield, caught in an impossible conflict between personal desire and dynastic duty. But even to enter this dangerous game, to have a chance at either triumph or tragedy, a woman first had to survive a series of invasive and bizarre examinations designed to prove her worthiness. Their bodies became a battleground, caught in an impossible conflict between personal desire and dynastic duty. But even to enter this dangerous game, to have a chance at either triumph or tragedy, a woman first had to survive a series of invasive and bizarre examinations designed to prove her worthiness. Palace midwives conducted what were politely called purity tests. But these were far more than simple checks of virginity. Women were judged on the tiniest, most arbitrary details: their physical proportions, the scent of their skin, their breathing patterns during sleep, even whether they might snore or talk unconsciously. Imagine living with the constant gnawing fear that a single involuntary sound made while asleep could cost you your future, your life. Concubines who failed these bizarre criteria were dismissed from bedroom service, their value to the empire instantly erased. The cruelty and absurdity of these requirements reached a grotesque peak during the reign of Sultan Ibrahim in the 1640s. After becoming fixated on the anatomy of a cow during a hunting trip, Ibrahim ordered golden models of its hindquarters to be made and sent to every corner of the empire. His governors were given a terrifying and unprecedented order: find women whose bodies matched the replicas. It was a recruitment drive unlike any other, a mobilization of the entire state apparatus to satisfy one man's bizarre fantasy. Eventually, a 330-pound Armenian woman known as Maria was found, renamed Shivakar, and became a favorite of the Sultan, her body celebrated as a treasure of the empire. Ibrahim's reign also introduced another obsession: furs. Convinced the pelts of wild animals enhanced his performance, he demanded the palace be lined with them. Wolf skins replaced priceless Persian carpets, and bear pelts hung where silk tapestries once glowed, transforming the Sultan's private chambers into something between a throne room and a primitive hunter's den. But the whims of a single mad sultan were just temporary storms within a much larger, more permanent system. For beyond the eccentricities of any one ruler, the harem operated with the cold, unchanging precision of a military machine, where every encounter, every touch, and every sigh was meticulously recorded in the ledgers of the empire. The whims of a single, mad sultan were just temporary storms within a much larger, more permanent system. For beyond the eccentricities of any one ruler, the harem operated with the cold, unchanging precision of a military machine, a place where every encounter, every touch, and every sigh was meticulously recorded in the ledgers of the empire. The treasurer of the palace kept detailed diaries of every intimate encounter. In a quiet, candlelit office, a scribe would dip his quill in ink and reduce a night of supposed passion to a few clinical entries: the date, the woman's name, the outcome. This was bureaucracy applied to intimacy, a system designed to prevent disputes over succession by creating an undeniable paper trail. In this world, even the act of love was reduced to paperwork. The consequences for defying this rigid schedule were deadly. One of Sultan Suleiman's own wives, Gulfem Hatun, was executed for selling her appointed knight to another concubine. This was not a simple transaction. It was a desperate act, and its punishment sent a brutal message to every woman in the palace. Your bodies are not your own to trade. You are the property of the state. The fact that women were willing to risk death to buy and sell these encounters shows how valuable they had become. An underground economy of desire and influence thrived in the shadows, where women traded jewelry and favors to bribe servants or manipulate the rotation. It was a hidden marketplace where intimacy itself had become the ultimate currency. But this world where desire was a line item in an imperial ledger and love could be a capital crime was only one part of the control. The true genius of the harem's power lay not just in the ink on the page, but in the unseen eyes that watched from the shadows. This was a world where desire was a line item in an imperial ledger and love could be a capital crime. But these written records were only the most visible part of the control. The true genius of the harem's power lay not in the ink on the page, but in the unseen eyes that watched from the shadows. The Sultan's private quarters were not designed for romance. They were built for surveillance. Hidden corridors, known as secret roads, allowed eunuchs to move silently through the walls, their presence unheard and unfelt, ensuring that nothing truly escaped imperial oversight. Windows were angled not just for light, but for observation. The shimmering, breathtakingly beautiful Iznik tiles that lined the walls were not just for decoration. Their polished surfaces doubled as distorted mirrors, catching every movement and reflecting every gesture. Privacy was nothing more than an illusion, an indulgence granted only when it suited the empire. And above this entire system of observation sat the valid Sultan, the mother of the reigning ruler, who managed this empire of the night with the skill of a grand master. From her private chambers, she tracked menstrual cycles, pregnancies, and intimate availability, maintaining detailed charts as if the women's bodies were strategic resources to be managed like grain or gold. At the beginning of each month, she would reveal the new rotation in a ritual that was as theatrical as it was cruel. The concubines would gather in a silent, anxious assembly as the Valid Sultan made her pronouncements. Their fates were learned through the language of silk handkerchiefs. A handkerchief embroidered with golden thread meant immediate access to the Sultan's bed and the pinnacle of favor. A plain white cloth meant exile, a fall from grace that could be permanent. It was a world where every wall had ears and every reflection held a pair of watching eyes. The psychological weight of this constant observation was crushing. But before a woman could even face the terror of the Sultan's chamber, she first had to endure an exhausting and dehumanizing series of rituals designed to prepare her, body and soul, for the ordeal to come. It was a world where every wall had ears and every reflection held a pair of watching eyes. The psychological weight of this constant observation was crushing. But before a woman could even face the terror of the Sultan's chamber, she first had to endure an exhausting and dehumanizing series of rituals designed to prepare her, body and soul, for the ordeal to come. Days before her appointed time, the chosen concubine was moved into a special chamber, a luxurious isolation cell where she was cut off from the rest of the harem. Here, a team of attendants began the meticulous process of transforming her body into a flawless offering. The preparations were a sensory assault. She was subjected to hours of ritual bathing in scented waters, her skin massaged with exotic oils from Arabia and Persia. But this was not for her comfort. It was a purification, an almost spiritual cleansing designed to remove any trace of her own identity and prepare the vessel for its imperial purpose. She was dressed in delicate, single-use garments of the finest silk, often designed to be removed with ease. These clothes, once worn into the Sultan's chamber, would never be worn again. They were either destroyed or locked away as a relic of the encounter, a tangible record that the transaction had been completed. The journey to the Sultan's chamber was itself a silent performance of submission. The chosen woman was escorted by a retinue of eunuchs through the Altanol, the Golden Road, a series of secret winding passageways that ensured no other concubine could witness her progress. Imagine the terror of that walk. The only sounds are the soft slap of your slippers on the marble and the heavy, rhythmic breathing of your guards. Every turn of the corridor took her further from the familiar, bustling world of the harem and deeper into the dead silence of gilded isolation. When she finally arrived at the Sultan's door, a final set of instructions would be whispered to her. She was to enter the chamber, crawl to the foot of the bed, and wait silently. She could never turn her back on the Sultan for fear she might conceal a weapon, and she was forbidden to speak unless spoken to, forbidden to express pleasure or pain, forbidden even to sigh too heavily. She was an offering, perfected and purified. But how could any human being endure such an ordeal, to perform with such flawless, silent submission? The answer lay in the 2 years of relentless training that came before this night, a process designed to hollow out the soul and replace it with a perfect, unbreakable obedience. She was an offering, perfected and purified. But how could any human being endure such an ordeal, to perform with such flawless, silent submission? The answer lay in the 2 years of relentless conditioning that came before this night. A process designed to hollow out the soul and replace it with a perfect, unbreakable obedience. The moment a woman entered the harem, her training began. New arrivals were taught poetry, music, languages, and court etiquette, but the most guarded and important lessons were in what the palace records chillingly referred to as the intimate arts. These lessons were not taught by men, but by elderly concubines, women who had survived decades within the system, their own hearts long turned to stone. They instructed the new arrivals in the techniques of performance, a curriculum of survival. They taught them how to read the Sultan's moods from the smallest twitch of his brow, how to mirror his desires without appearing too eager, and most importantly, how to feign devotion while keeping their true selves locked away in a place no one could ever reach. By the end of their training, these women could perform emotions on command: love, passion, indifference, each an act perfected to keep them alive. The final test of this conditioning was a chilling examination before a panel of senior harem officials. Candidates were required to demonstrate their skills in simulated encounters, their movements and expressions judged as though intimacy were nothing more than a theatre performance. The cruelty did not end there. Immediately after every real encounter with the Sultan, the concubine was escorted out by waiting eunuchs and subjected to a medical examination. Within hours, her body was inspected for any sign of pregnancy, her worth measured not by her feelings or her experience, but by whether she might bear a child. This entire system was designed to strip away the possibility of genuine love. To show real affection for the Sultan was considered dangerous, a sign of personal loyalty that could threaten the absolute loyalty owed to the empire. A woman who dared to display real emotion was seen as a threat and quietly removed from the rotation, sometimes sent away, sometimes worse. It was a system that sought to control and document every facet of human intimacy, leaving no room for genuine feeling. But in a world where access to the Sultan was the ultimate source of power, this rigid control inevitably created a hidden marketplace, an underground economy where the very knights that the state so carefully managed were bought, sold, and traded in the shadows. It was a system that sought to control and document every facet of human intimacy, leaving no room for genuine feeling. But in a world where access to the Sultan was the ultimate source of power, this rigid control inevitably created a hidden marketplace, an underground economy where the very knights that the state so carefully managed were bought, sold, and traded in the shadows. The harem itself became a web of surveillance, where senior concubines were expected to report on the younger ones, and new arrivals were encouraged to expose the mistakes of their rivals. Every smile, every whisper, every glance could be twisted into evidence of betrayal. It was a war of shadows, where friendships were poisoned by rivalry and suspicion was the air that everyone breathed. Within this culture of fear, a desperate economy of influence thrived. Women who had fallen out of favor sometimes sold their precious jewelry to bribe eunuchs or influence the all-powerful Valide Sultan. Others used their scheduled nights as bargaining chips in complex political games, trading access to the Sultan for protection for their families or promotions for their allies. This was a dangerous game, and the execution of Gulfem Hatun for selling her night served as a permanent, terrifying reminder of the risks. Beauty was another battlefield, and the methods were dangerous. Women smeared their faces with lead-based powders to achieve a pale, luminous skin, ignoring the fact that the toxins burned and slowly poisoned their flesh. They rubbed mercury into their cheeks for a permanent blush, sacrificing their long-term health for a fleeting advantage in the hierarchy of desire. Fainting during encounters was common, the result of these relentless toxic beauty rituals and the starvation diets used to maintain fragile silhouettes. Even their food was a tool of control. Palace physicians designed meal plans that shifted with political needs, foods to encourage fertility when heirs were wanted, and herbs to prevent it when they were not. Every bite they ate was dictated by the demands of the empire. It was a world where every smile was a strategy, every meal a prescription, and every friendship a potential betrayal. The system was designed to own them, body and soul. But what happens to an empire built on such a foundation? What is the final legacy of a gilded cage when the gold has tarnished and the walls begin to crumble? It was a world where every smile was a strategy, every meal a prescription, and every friendship a potential betrayal. The system was designed to own them, body and soul. But the harem's invisible grip did not just hold the women. It was a prison for everyone within its walls. The eunuchs who guarded them, trusted with the empire's most intimate secrets, were themselves prisoners of the system, their loyalty guaranteed by their own mutilation, their humanity sacrificed to serve the throne. Even the Sultan, the master of this gilded cage, became its ultimate captive. The relentless system of control prevented him from forming genuine attachments, transforming him from a husband or lover into a mere figurehead of imperial desire, his own heart isolated by the very machinery designed to protect his power. History, however, records rare exceptions, moments when a single, determined soul broke the rules and slipped through the cracks. The story of Hurrem Sultan is the most famous. Her defiance of the overnight rule marked not only her survival, but her astonishing ascendancy. She became Suleiman's legal wife, an unprecedented honor, and wielded influence that shaped the empire for decades, proving that even the most rigid system could be bent by a will strong enough. But Hurrem's triumph was the exception that proves the devastating rule. For every woman who successfully navigated the treacherous currents of the harem, thousands of others were silently consumed by them, their stories ending not in power, but in obscurity, exile, or a quiet death. The archives remain, a silent testament to their lives. Pages of schedules, rules, punishments, and ceremonies, each one whispering the same chilling truth. The Ottoman harem was less about desire than about domination. It was a machine designed to control not only women's bodies, but also men's hearts, to ensure that love never interfered with the empire's iron will. The marble halls of Topkapi Palace still stand today, the tiles still glisten, and the corridors still echo with a profound silence. But if you listen closely, you may hear the whispers of those who once walked them, the women who lived, loved, and died under the weight of rules that turned intimacy into spectacle and affection into a crime. What other secrets do you think are still hidden within the walls of ancient palaces, waiting to be discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe these forgotten voices deserve to be heard, subscribe for more journeys into the dark heart of history.